can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary.
Black woman arise, open up your eyes. You better realize. Black man arise, black woman arise. Open up your eyes, realize. One day at a time. One day at a time. One day at a time. Pan-Africans. 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 I'm calling all Pan-Africans. Let's meet in Addis Ababa, in Addis Ababa. Let's meet in Addis Ababa, in Addis Ababa. Let's meet in Addis Ababa, in Addis Ababa. Let's meet in Addis Ababa, in Addis Ababa.
Single point I wish to get across before we start anything. I am not here to debate with anyone. I have devoted all of my adult life to this subject. I only debate with my equals. All others I teach.
And it's going down. Babylon is going down. It's going down. Babylon is going down. And it's going down. And it's going down. Babylon is going down. And it's going down.
Nowhere to run, chaos across the border. Government iko out of order, duty zake hayanaenda kwenye shoulder. Wamedisi raia na ndio mashareholder. Man to man wasona kulana. Sasa anajituma kusaka juhana. Kila kona manzeku maumana. Society nao inalaumu ujana. Masnitch wengi, form ni kuuzana. Malipo ni hapa hapa tutakutana. Itabidi kivoria tumevurugana. Wataganda si ati tutakutana. Siku mingi wametutukana. Defense yetu ni Maulana. Ametulinda kwa urefu na upana. Bure sisi sote tumekuanza.
This is part of a world war against the role of African people in the history of the world. If we began history, began mankind, how is it that the last branch of the human race to enter that arena, marked civilization, now think they brought civilization?
going down. Babylon is going down.
What is happening in the Western world? There was a recent book called The Tribes. It diagrammed every people, major people on the earth, searching for a piece of turf for themselves. It left out the African people because the other people, including Asian imperialists, have plans to take over Africa. There have been several articles in the New York Times advocating the recolonization of Africa. This book and other literature of this nature mean to prepare the world to accept a rationalization for the re-enslavement of Africa. Now, and when you deal with the black endorsers of the book, running dogs of the new imperialism, professional white behind kissers, and as Carlos Cook used to say, a disgrace to the skin they wear. These people, if I'm be so kind to call them that, are running from themselves and teaching us a lesson that we should have learned long ago. Sometimes white wannabes are more dangerous than whites. And sometimes they'll fight you harder to be accepted by whites. They are running from their own people.
Situation ni rough na upita get better, ikuwe ni sooner rather than later. In high office ni madikteta, mtaani si ajabu kupigwa ngeta. System iwaka inaja kuteta, katiba ni spirit sio tu leta. Umaskini ni ufisadi imeleta, tunasafa politician na metameta. For long nimekuwa tu spectator, sana join jeshi ya investigator. Revolution naiva kwa incubator, education ndio fuel ya hii generator. Love ndio keys tambui maheta, works great, tuna do greater. Self-sufficiency tujundie masweta, civilization Africa ndio peseta.
In America, black people are treated very much as the Vietnamese people or any other colonized people because we're brutalized. The police occupy our community as a foreign troop occupies territory.
Freedom fighters. Freedom fighters. Freedom fighters. Freedom fighters. Tamkwa ni masikio na bega, nishati Heru ndio alfa na omega, anaprovidea kila mtu sana sana mabega. Mafama tunamhei kwanza si wa Kakamega. Ancestors wetu chini ya mkoloni waliteseka, wengi walitolewa makwao wakapelekwa mateka, wakahopa tarudi mtaa kabla ya kuzeeka. Hiyo story nikikumbuka pia mimi nasononeka. Kuna pia Waafrika kwa whitelist nimewaeka, ni sad bado hakuna mahali naweza wapeleka. Uchumi mademu wengi wameshindwa kuoleka, mwichanda mesota hawezi afford hata kamkeka. Grandfather badala ya kumsaidia yeye ni kumcheka, kwa mahindi yake ataoleka na mnaijaa Emeka ama sultan fulani kutoka huko Meka.
I came to this subject before I was 10 as a Baptist Sunday school teacher. I wanted to teach junior class in Sunday school, so I learned to read very early. What baffled me from the beginning was the Bible itself. I could not find my people in a book that's supposed to be about all mankind. And what called my attention to the neglect of Africa was the Sunday school lessons with all those white angels. And when they said God is love, God is kind, God is no respecter of kith or kin. I kept wondering, why didn't he let at least one or two little brown or black angels sneak into heaven? So I began to suggest that somebody else had tampered with God's book in favor of somebody else, and that the Bible to a great extent was a rationale for European domination, but had been used as such. A book called The New Negro, and I found an essay by a Puerto Rican of African descent, Arthur Schomburg. The essay was called The Negro Digs Up His Past. Now I knew I was not only older than slavery, I was older than my oppressor, and my oppressor was the last branch of the human race to enter that arena. Mock civilization. Don't get mad, get smart. Prove me wrong.
Crisis natoka kwa fire, natoka kwa frying pan. Kaki na Abednego na survive sita ban. Revolutionary soldier, amini a son of man. Ancient vibration, nothing new under the sun. Moderation, kila kitu ni western. Mamidi kibao, ukiwa solo maskan. Wageni ndio hao, ahlan wa sahlan. Vibe wicked zina end up kwa trash can. Heru ndio down na kuna space ya Satan. Ancestors wetu kujua rawa waliitwa mapiega. Origins zinjanthropus alikuwa vegan. Spirit ya resistance, Kimathi Deda. Makasgavi alisema Africa for the African. Christianity ni African, si Katho Anglican. Dunia yote iko under spell ya Vatican. Wamedharau tribes za Africa, kaa kan. Sita watolerate na mashinani guns. Ni hao wameleta huku mashinani guns. Utana food kejani yako na big gun. Violence iko juu, that's how it began. Gava inalia silaha ramu waziritan. Zile ligondo zinaua watu in turn. Church imefuga kila tukidhani ati ni nani. Hakuna mse righteous. There's none, there's none, there's none.
Go study the history of your masters. Study the people who took you out of history. Then you'll understand your history.
No more Babylon in town. No more Babylon in town. No Babylon in town. Situation sio poa kamenuka. Bei ya vitu imepanda kwa duka. Moderation na kuka. Stabu timinji kichwa inaweza lipuka. Hali si hali tunashtuka. Ni mtu mwanga tunavuka. Daily kuna maswala zinaibuka. Politician bado tu anatusuka. Kishawahi achelewi kuruka. Revolution drives zimezuka. Urezo amedozi itabidi ameng'atuka. Wamesalipea sijui atakaa na kubuka. Juzi alipandisha bei ya gas kuka. Sheria amekunja ni ngumu kukunjuka. Hajui hata kuna mtu zimekauka. Up my race ni high time tumerauka. Black program
It is the first book, and it's a book of folklore, and we really don't know whether Homer wrote it, or whether home was man or woman. It's the first book to become known, basic to the West, in a form that we could study and conjecture about, and it emerged at the time Europe was beginning to show some intellectual maturity. And if you deal with this, you have to deal with what Professor Leslie would accuse me of, not paying attention to historical chronology. And if she read any of my texts, any of my numerous guides and curriculars and lecture notes, you know that I'm a specialist on chronology. I know that one comes first and two comes second. But what I was trying to get across is that in the 8th century to the 12th century, so the intellectual emergence of Europe, at a time Egypt was in its 23rd dynasty and dying after nearly 10,000 years of some forms of organized society. Europe intellectually was just being born. And I further maintain that Europe in general had nothing to do with the creation of Rome and Greece, and yet the challenge of Rome and Greece created Europe, because they were scattered tribes, and the challenge of Rome and Greece brought them together, and they became a people strong enough to create a state. If anybody got any information to the contrary, state the information to the contrary. I maintain that there was no Europe. You're giving Europe credit for things that happened before the first European war. Shoe or lived in a house that had a window.
21st century rani yule mmoja, jeshi ni ya Heru, aya 9 ndio masoja, Rastafari taking over, we've all got to know ja, dunia mpya hii na imejaa vioja, rule international morality haiko na si hoja, mayuta wakosi silaha kwa toja, ukiwa cross wanakuangusha mara moja, situation ni rough, vitu zinakuwa mystic, hii world mpya iko so materialistic, bado sielewi hata necessity ya lipstick, ancient man, kwa hiyo damini critic, organization ya squeezy iko so pathetic, homo sapiens ako less athletic, bafo ungepata mse ako diabetic, hakuna mse lack knowledge ya anesthetics, melanated man na woman wali invent mathematics, cosmic dance zili involve acrobatics, structure ziliundwa bila hata robotics, Africans wali study optics, Christianity true ni ile ya Coptics, hii ya Rome tuiweke kwa septic, biological war wase wako epileptic, na bado tuna deal na mapandemic.
When Alexander entered Egypt, he wrote home to his mother and said that he at last reached the land where the Greek gods began, Apollo and Zeus. And he wanted to consult one of the great African teachers or oracles. And the oracle asked, "How old is this man?" He said, 32. They said, "In 20 years, maybe he'll be wise enough to ask me a question that I care to answer."
Oh, what a day. Oh, what a day. His Majesty comes again. His Majesty comes again. I say, woe unto them. Woe unto them. Majesty comes again. His Majesty comes again. They will be weeping and mourning, gnashing of teeth. His Majesty comes again.
Because I maintain that every people who came into Africa, Greeks, everything from modern day English, everybody that came into Africa did Africa more harm than good. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that Africa owes nothing to outsiders in regard to development, because all of them declared war on African culture, war on African civilization, war on African ways of life. They began to bastardize Africa and confuse and create a kind of historical schizophrenia that the Africans had even got rid of to this very day. And they created whole words that did not previously exist, like Middle East. Middle from what? I think you have emphasized too much the word black, and we made the same mistake. Black tells you how you look, but it don't tell you who you are. The proper name of a people must always relate to land, history, and culture. I did not say Cleopatra was black. I quoted someone else who inferred that. My defense of Cleopatra is not on her blackness, but on no matter whatever she was. She was born in Africa. Her manipulation of Mark Antony and Caesar kept the worst aspect of Roman rule from the backs of Africa. I defend her as an African nationalist. And that's a good defense. And no matter what she did with her wares in and out of bed, there's a whole lot of people got less for it.
Babylon ni wicked na wamespread all over. Wamekuja virafu sana, hati yao ndio gova. Taxpayer sina maji na ngatai kosi kwa Land Rover. Hawatira na hati wako na bana ya Jehova. Sita sell out, sijali nini wanaofa. Wameharibu nature, ndio waunde magorofa. Msitu zimeangushwa, ndio waunde masofa. Wamecorrupt ngazi zote hadi sulfur. All over me, Babylon them all over me. All over me, Babylon.
Professor Clark, do you think that we should always judge history in terms of race?
Look, there was no such thing as race in the psyche of the world until the Europeans put it into the psyche of the world. The Africans knew nothing about race and didn't think they belonged to anything called a race. And when the Africans saw the Europeans, because they have a traditional hospitality to strangers, they didn't fight them, they didn't kill, they were curious about them. And with the African explorers, especially Mungo Park, went into Africa, nobody hurt him, nobody shot at him, nobody shot any arrows at him. The Europeans went in peacefully, but the Africans heard that Mungo Park was a pork eater. Most people don't know it, but Africans were not great pork eaters, and they're not great pork eaters today. Pork was a meat you ate in certain ceremonies, certain times a year. But we were not great pork eaters before we came to the United States or were forced to the United States. But in the United States, we had to eat the part of the pigs that white folks threw away, so we made delicacies out of it and survived. I had this argument with Malcolm X. I said, if it wasn't for the black woman making delicacies out of pig feet, pig heels, guts, chitlins, you and I would be here arguing the point. I'm afraid that you're not only a delinquent in African history, you're delinquent in African folklore. So much of our history is tied up with our folklore, but Europe has introduced words that didn't exist in anyone's vocabulary before. No one ever thought of anybody being inferior or superior. Intelligent people don't even a human being can't fall into that category. And nobody had the extensive problem the Europeans had with women, because in the period of feudalism in Europe that lasted over 1,000 years, the white woman in Europe was a vassal. Right. But the African woman has never been a vassal in that sense. If you read Sheikh Anta Diop's The Culture Unity of Black Africa, dealing with the history of the matriarch, I mean, he's got all evidence right there that we were the first people to support a woman as head of state. We were the first people to put women as riding ahead of her army. We were the first people to make women a god.
Shukuru Ra amenilinda naelekea salasa. Life ina bwana, mtu mpya ni ukurasa. Life ni serious na hakuna time ya anasa. Hakuna kitu mpya hata hizi mbinu za kisasa. Shukrani kibao ni kwa mzae na masa. Hata nikiarie bado walinipapasa. Kwa wazazi nililearn more than kwa darasa. Hawakuchelewa kuniekelea viboko kwa rasa. Ila nikimes ni hao walinikataza. Walinishow ujinga yangu sijaisambaza. Walinifunza saa ya kusema na saa ya kunyamaza. Nikiwa na issue ni hao waliniliwaza. Hata nikuwe place za faa waliniwaza. Walinivumilia siku zote niliwakwaza. Na wameminia sifa na sio mimi wa kwanza. Wazazi wamesifiwa tangu dunia kuanza. Ra ancient vibration in a DC time.
There's a lot of people who believe in the African awakening and discovering of their history and their culture who do not accept the word Afrocentricity because it's a compromise with the word African. It's either African centricity or it's nothing.
That's right.
As I said in the beginning, it is beyond the lack and dislike of Afrocentricity, which has not even developed enough to be called a discipline. It is a world war to prepare the mind to accept the re-enslavement of Africa, to remove from the mind of all people anything good that the African has done, and to ignore the fact that Europe set up Africa to fall apart by imposing on Africa through miseducated Africans a nation state. The nation state is un-African. The African thrived at his best in the territorial state. Many cultures, many languages, side by side, challenging each other, fertilizing each other. What you might call an empire. If you study the last 1,000 years before slavery, the development of independent states in the Western Sudan, Ghana, Mali, Songay, destroyed by the invasion from North Africa by the Arabs attacking the North African Muslims, attacking the African Muslims, and destroying the great university of St. Korea, exiling its greatest scholar, Ahmed Baba, who admonished his students, believe in God and science. The Africans never separated God from science. The priest was scientists. The priest was the most knowledgeable person. That's why you had the concept of a priest God. Now, if they wipe this out of the mind of our children, and our children look at television and sound bites and think they were nothing but a nothing, when they re-enslave Africa, they're going to say, good Father. They're preparing us to accept it. They're preparing the world to accept the re-enslavement of African people all over the world.
Marshall na
yao si ati ni moja, ziko several. Story yao tunaibonga tu kwa funeral. Wamerepa Afrika, wameloot kwanza mamineral. Ni mahithen, wanadhani wandokuwa liberal. Sitaki mchezo na washondireta ithero. Na mdima umau tuko hadi huisero. Spirit ni ya kiwori ya kimati indestero. Inspiration ya hardship suit akiwa fero. Jeshi ni ya hero, tuta avenge mapero. Umetudisa tulikuwa makanibal. Hawaji tuliproduce wase great ka Hannibal. Kwa wafunza treatment ziko surgical. Functions za hiyo code wanaita umbilical. Revolution na nakampi lyrical. Na address injustice zote ziko historical. Timing ya revolution ni astronomical. Energy niko nayo ni mob, ziko economical. Hii issue approach ni philosophical. Achievement za mababu zetu mimi naziricall. Evidence iko mob sana na ni physical. Cape Town hadi Cairo, Somalia hadi Senegal. Don't leave the ancient oracle. Al-Kibulan, Omema miracle.
Black people need some peace. White people need some peace. And we are going to have to fight. We're going to have to struggle. We're going to have to struggle relentlessly to bring about some peace.
If we get into the nonsense about black anti-Semitism, blacks have always had a sentimental attachment to the Jews. They actually believe the Bible. You know, we are the true believers. We out Pope the Pope. We out Muhammad. But religion has always been a political thing to Europeans, and still is. And when it no longer serves them politically, they're going to discard it. They turn their backs and let this happen. Now they're creating a new game they call Europe has spoiled Europe. They want to take some geography outside of Europe. They say the people they're going to take the geography from are unworthy. They can't rule themselves. Of course, they cannot rule themselves in artificial states set up by the Europeans. First thing the Africans have to do is just get rid of these borders. Re-establish the borders along the old lines.
Rana manifest daily, check it to sunset. Nijani imelindwa na set, imeblesiwa na asset. Tuchambue hiyo medi uko asset. Record kwa stone sio tukaset. Kumbuke goddess bastet. Wengi wetu mweka carpet. Ni mroyo na chafui carpet. Anajihila na ajavet. Ni creature highly miwa na mred. God happy ana trod ka primate. Nature miwa na respect. Hopefully niko hali siko late. Creator siwezi mforget. Amenifunza love sio hate. Existence yake study page. Medi zake ndazidi kuji-educate.
I think the whole concept of the library at Alexander might be an often repeated myth, and it might not have existed at all. We have not found any foundation. Now you can burn the building, but you can't burn the foundation because that's underground. Well, according to most information I know, the library, the books in the library consist of raping a lot of small libraries in Egypt. And so when they burned down the library, they burned and lost to the world information that will never be recovered. So I don't think the library was a service, although it is spoken of as a high point of intellectual contribution. It was not. It was part of Greek imperialism. The raping of the small African libraries. He consolidated the books. Had he left them scattered in small libraries, we might still have access to them. But you put them in one place that got burned down, and the world can never recover that information. So I don't consider the library at Alexander any compliment to African people or Greeks.
Wayaita down mangati, wicked Babylon now, no Illuminati. Ati white boy, dom tana shati, atakula videvu na jipate kwa zahanati. Na ini wona nakuja na umati. Two side usikae katikati, ni poa kuwa comrade side ya wanati. Na loni ya nature tutrod na torati. Wayaita down mangati. Wayaita down mangati, amina sema wayaita down mangati, wicked Babylon now, no Illuminati. Fire ita burn down Mangati, minasema fire ita burn down Mangati. Fire ita burn down Mangati, wicked Babylon now ndio Illuminati.
I think we many times ask the right question the wrong way. The racism that we know today started in the 15th and the 16th century as a rationale for slavery. Whatever harm the Romans and the Greeks did, they had no racism compared to the racism of today. Otherwise, why would there be 3 African emperors of Rome? You know that. And why would there be 3 African popes in the early Roman Church? And why would Septimus Severus become the governor of England? The country's going to become England. I'm saying that if you charge the Greeks with the same kind of color prejudice we have today, you're charging them wrong. They've got enough crimes that they're guilty of without that. They had a respect for talent wherever they found it, even among the people they conquered. And the people they conquered had upward mobility to the extent they fitted into the Greek or the Roman political intentions of that day. Now, I have gone to England and had the privilege of going in the basement of the British Museum. As a commoner, naturally I couldn't go, but when they asked the other person with me, what is your authority to enter and look at the sites in the basement of the British Museum? He was a Caribbean person who lived in America most of his life, but he wasn't a citizen, so he had officially been knighted by the Queen. And so he pulled out his card and the door to the basement opened. And we saw the picture of Herodotus, matted hair, pug nose, similar to mine. The statue was in the basement of the British Museum, where it will stay and not be on display. But I don't argue Herodotus on the basis of his blackness or anything else. I argue on the fact that he had wandered away from his people. He had learned a concept and a way of living, a way of morality, different from that of his people. So just like Jesus Christ, when he came back among his people, he was preaching something that alien to that belief. This food trip, been driving the money changers from the temple. What did they think we're going to make money? But in other words, what kind of Jew is this? A strange kind of Jew. He don't want us to engage in trade. The Romans didn't want to have anything to do with it. So when the Roman governor when he was put on trial for sorcery, the Romans, he wasn't harming the Romans, he wasn't even preaching to the Romans, he was preaching to his own people. And so he pushed them back and said, he's your king. And they pushed him back toward the Romans and said, not my king. But he coming with all those foolish ideas. He hanging out in Egypt. So Herodotus has been, I didn't say he went to Africa, I don't know. But he was influenced by African moral thought.
Ancient vibration in a this year time.
The Kenya London Freedom Army.
Yes, I.
Kenya London Freedom Army.
Ni high time mayutu waikwera their history. Mkoloni alileta hasara na semi hata sori wa loot vitu mob. Wameacha tu mashimo za kwari. Afrika imekuwa junkyard yao ya magari. Revolution imekuwa na ndo maana wanawari. Wako kwa illusion na salvation yao iko Calvary, njiani na masila hatari. Come na word sound and power na nitawabari. Marcus niko confident, siko ina hurry. Wo bado na wanadunda tayari. No mercy for the merciless. Makio kwa diary. Mkoloni ataganda kabla hata afikia amari ni revolution. Na vi strategic tunaikari. Ni onslaught kuliko ile masaka ya lari. State of emergency. Pia mimi nimejaa mori. Long live Field Marshal Kimathi wa Shuri. Kenya London Freedom Army. The Kenya London Freedom Army. We are the Kenya London Freedom Army. Kenya London Freedom Army. We are the Kenya London Freedom
People never educate you in the technique you can use to take their power away from them. See, education has but one honorable purpose, one alone. Everything else is a waste of time. That to train the student to be a responsible handler of power. No one ever wants us to be responsible handlers of power. I'm saying that it has nothing to do with political lines. The left don't want us to be responsible no more than the right. But they want to dominate us in a different way from the right, and they think they can dominate us better. It's an argument of not of whether we will be free, but who will enslave us. And had we should accepted the responsibility of making black studies strong enough to take this assault. We could have anticipated it and argued with it, but we anticipated too much energy arguing among ourselves over triviality. We are partly to blame for what is happening.
Can't keep a good man down. No, you can't keep a good man down. Can't keep a good man down. No, you can't keep a good man down. Randu Don Afrika amesikika, King of Kings, crown amejivika, na akona migraine pia wamesifika. Ka Yeshua Kristo, hata majua limshika, Pita akamkana kabla ya jogoo kuwika. Holy Spirit, na wadi ndo mimi naandika, nimeficha white for long sando na yanika. But love ina sustain, na hiyo ni kila dakika, kuteleza si kuanguka, na inakubalika. Yerua kwa anointed, na ametakasika. Rastaman live, hata wakimzika. Faith iko strong, na haijaharibika. Life ni struggle, mimi nimetaabika. Rando ananilinda, na ni kwa hakika. Kula salimob, bana utatapika. Repent, juraha shaka sirika. Akorada, na anatumulika. Heaven, rame tualika. Dhambi zote anaweza zifunika. Atakani mob kampo imefurika. Rame ni bless, nimeridhika. Ndio maana akiniita, miwa naitika. Ukiri heru, ni sitawai aizika. Niende alizaliwa na fikra. Nyote za Babylon zote.
There are Semitic speaking people of all colors. So it's not an exclusive thing for the people who adopted the name Jew, mainly in Europe, because the word Jew was not used widely in the ancient world. We knew people of the Hebrew faith, but there are people of the Hebrew faith in India, China, and it's a universal religion. A lot of people belong to it, including some misguided blacks who call themselves black Jews. Now, if you want to belong to the Hebrew faith, you just belong to the Hebrew faith. It's a right. Why you have to attach color to it? The Indians don't call themselves, brown Jews. They just call themselves people who belong to the Hebrew faith. And when they went to Israel, they got the shock of their lives by being reduced to second-class citizenship.
Wema na tusichoke hata tukihema, tuzidi kuhip hop hadi kwa vilema. Tribalism gema na hakuna hata dema. Tuungane, hiyo ndo kitu mimi nasema. Chanda chema yuvi kwa pete mapema. Rastaman form ni kutenda wema, na sio tu zile sifa za mgema. Rando Don, achanini na hao madrima. Chorea mama pima, anapoteza stima. Heri nisikizie hub, nipate nimeririma. Kinoa tuingie kwa safina na tufanye hima. Culture tusahau, Nzaka daily tunailima. Miogo inapika sima, bakery bila stima. Mioto za Babylon zote tunazima. Uchoyo mob, hadi freedom wananinyima. Tusimame wima, sini man sio kima. I've got to be free in the...
If you see a complete map of Africa, Egypt is focused, then imagine a woman's body. Oh, yeah. Egypt is the culture womb of that body. Although its original population came from the south, and there's so many documents to prove this, it's not even an arguable point. If Egypt gave birth to a civilization, the impregnation started in the south. And Egypt became the beneficiary of the largest gathering of technology, of technicians in history. Because the Nile Valley stretches 4,000 miles into the body of Africa. When Egypt discovered massive agriculture, she could feed a lot of people, she could house a lot of people. And people with mixtures of gods and beliefs brought it all together into one powerful belief. Egypt was the culmination of several African civilizations, and not just Egypt alone. One of the main reasons the European can't leave it alone, because he did not create it. Why would he come from Europe during the latter part of the Ice Age and create something in Egypt and go back and live under the Ice Age 2,000 years before he built a European shoe? Come on, let's be real now. Let's be real. Why are they so generous to other people when they're not generous to themselves? Europe under feudalism was Europe under slavery, whites enslaving whites. And you study the condition of the European woman during feudalism.
Modern day slavery. Modern day slavery. We in a modern day slavery. Mwachamila bila shaka ni mtumwa. Tuchangamke tujitume bila hata kusukumwa. Nikikumbuka slavery zile enzi za utumwa, ni vibe wicked sana, moyoni na umwa. Shrine zetu moto tulizimiwa. Ngori mob za dunia ni Mwafrika ulaumiwa. Time ya slavery hatukuhurumiwa. Tulipiga wera mob kwa shamba za miwa, usiku na mchana na tunangurumiwa. Bado wanaona Mwafrika kama mtu wa kutumiwa. Ukoloni mamboleo wameleta hukumiwa. Tukipanda hub zetu tunahukumiwa. Hata tusipofanya kitu tunashutumiwa. Ngori hata hatuelewi tunasukumiwa. Mkoloni ameinvade shamba zetu tunalimiwa. Msee ni mwizi mkubwa na ati anaitwa mheshimiwa. Modern day slavery. Modern day slavery. We in a modern day slavery. Modern day slavery. We in a modern day slavery.
Let's stop talking about usefulness and talk about honesty. Let's talk about the making of the United States, the design of this country. It was designed as a haven for free white Protestant males, middle class and up, those who agreed with the prevailing political status quo and who owned property. Everybody else in this country who think this country was designed for them are telling themselves a lie. The Jews were out of it, the Catholics were out of it, the Quakers were out of it. Now look at who's held power in this nation. Only one non-Protestant president. And how long did they last before they killed him? When they said liberty and justice for all, that's the all they were talking about. The other people think they were talking about them. The country have not betrayed any promise to you, had even made any promise to you. What even talking about you in the first place? Let's tell the real truth about all the founding fathers being slaveholders. Let's read the letters George Washington wrote when he wanted some special molasses from the Caribbeans, and he offered to send one train nigger as payment for the molasses. Let's not take George Washington out of history, but let's put the blacks in history along with him. Let's talk about James Fortan, who made the tents for George Washington. And George Washington found that those wax matted cloth of the tents was stronger than the cloth in the breeches of his soldiers. He asked James Fortan to make some breeches of that same cloth. Those breeches made by a black man turned that terrible third and fourth winter of the American Revolution. Don't take George Washington out, but put James Fortan in with it.